This week on Pod Have Mercy, we're kind of reaching back into the vault and doing some of our favorites. And this week we're going to look at Rudy Rasmus. We interviewed him. Actually, it was one of the first times we interviewed anyone on location. We went to his coffee shop in the Heights and sat down with him. And it was just a really wonderful conversation. Rudy's been a friend of mine for a long time. I think since when I first moved to Houston in '97, which feels like 100 years ago. Someone told me that I needed to meet him, and we connected. He's a pastor at St. John's United Methodist Church, and at the time was I think the second largest United Methodist Church in the city, and was just doing some amazing things with folks that had been out of church, folks on the street, folks in addiction. He was in the 80s and 90s, had a children's program for parents or kids that had AIDS. And so he was just in the trenches being Jesus there. And he's not only been a friend, but has been someone that has deeply formed my faith. And so we're going to look back into this conversation. I hope you love it as much as we did. And I hope that it blesses you as much as it blessed me. If you like the podcast, make sure that you like it, that you share it, that you talk about it, that you sell tickets to it, whatever you got to do, because we're hoping that some of these conversations bless other people. Have a great day.
This is Pod Have Mercy. We're on site.
This is awesome.
Yes. So today we got Rudy Rasmus, pastor of St. John's, and man, just great dude, involved in a lot of stuff. And we decided what better way. We love coffee, so we drink a lot of coffee when we do our podcast. And we got some folks that actually send us coffee. They're not advertisers, but they just send us coffee. So we thought, how cool would it be to visit with you here at Through Good Coffee, which is your place. Tell us a little bit about Through Good and kind of what you're doing, and tell us about what's going on next door soon, because that sounds exciting.
First of all, it's good to be with y'all. And I'm telling you, coffee is something either you love or just drink, and that's what that's what I've discovered. I was actually officing in a coffee shop over the years, probably 7-8 years ago. Just often, instead of officing at the church, I would office at a coffee shop. So subsequently, I meet all of these amazing young baristas. One talks me into going into the coffee business. And right about the time we finished the building, he decided to become a yoga instructor and left town. So I kind of got jumped in pretty much to the coffee game. But this particular building, I actually built 40 years ago when I was 24 years old. I just kind of moved to Houston, started buying real estate. They were the go-go years, 1980, when Houston was still growing and emerging. And this neighborhood was actually the neighborhood I grew up in. It was a sort of a transitioning black neighborhood. And I just, built a daycare center. This building was originally a daycare center, kind of as a Robin Hood venture, because I was doing some crazy shit down the street, and I said, here, I just did a business that could help my neighborhood. So we did free childcare here for many years, and about 8 years ago, I decided to go in the coffee business. Took me about 2 years to renovate the building, and 5 years ago we got opened. And from that point forward, it's been a blast. Though I like it. It's I think it's probably the most expensive hobby I've ever had. And
What is it? Somebody say you can't justify a passion.
you can't justify it.
It doesn't make any sense. A boat.
You just do it. Yeah. But
Owning a coffee shop.
But, it started out as a well-intended venture, because my original concept was to create a coffee shop that created jobs for young people who were hard to employ. but I ended up with creating jobs for young people, period. And so all of the folk who work here are probably 40 years younger than me.
Keeps you young.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah.
So
the Heights is interesting. I think we were talking about it a little bit before, but my daughter got married in April, and they live like 1 or 2 blocks from here. And so it's just interesting how much more I come to the Heights now than I used to. Because like if you want to see them, they move out, man. When kids get married and they move out, it's like they're gone.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, if it floods, come to the Heights.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, man. It doesn't flood over here. It's the highest point in Houston. It's crazy.
Yeah. And it's the thing about Heights that people don't know Houston. I mean, we have so many different like areas and pockets and neighborhoods that have like their own. We're kind of insulated over on the west side, Memorial, because it's kind of like country club, you know, area of Houston. But when you come to the Heights, it's alive. There's bars and restaurants.
Exactly.
There's a little tiki lounge, Lalo. You ever been there?
Lalo.
It's a tiki bar.
Okay. Because there's one right.
They just opened a new one called Tequila.
Tequila, a block away.
A tiki drink.
It's a block from here.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, that kind of stuff is so cool to me.
Yeah.
Now you just bought next door.
Right next door. Yeah.
Right. And I was looking up because Throughgood is here on what's the street?
West 27th.
West 27th.
Mm-hmm.
But next door, you just bought this. And what are you going to do there?
Yeah, we're going to do the Creole Tea Room. It's a kind of a take on. So it's going to have a sort of a New Orleans vibe, fried chicken and beignets, and a couple of sandwiches, a couple of po' boys, but primarily jazz on the weekends.
That's awesome.
You know, brunch on kind of a jazz brunch, Saturdays, Sundays, and but real, at night it's going to go hard. We're going to do wine. I tell my friends all the time, my Baptist friends, that Jesus' first miracle.
Keeping a party going.
Keep the party going. So yeah.
I think there was jazz at that wedding.
I think it was, but yeah. So we're gonna one of the goals is to feature some black vineyards, some black-owned vineyards.
That's awesome.
From around the country.
That's great.
And for instance, here we the roasters are people of color, which is kind of different for coffee. Coffee is very hard to enter as an industry for people of color, primarily because there are no pathways. There are very few black-owned shops around the country. Very primarily because it's the margins are really tough, and it's very expensive to get into.
What does it get into roasting? That's expensive too?
That's an expensive proposition.
You got to know what you're doing on that too.
And you got to know coffee, and to know coffee, you have to actually get certain certifications. And those classes are expensive and time consuming.
Yes.
Of which very few people have an opportunity to do that. So either you get sort of jumped in by experience, or you find another job, but rarely do people of color end up in the coffee trade. Just very few.
Yeah. Since I've known you, you've had your hand in a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. You've got, but it all has connection to people.
Yeah.
It all has connection to this kind of deep sense of betterment of other folks. In your own interest as well. You have interest in these things, but there always seems to be this kind of output of people. And you've been in this area, in the Heights, you've had like roots, your root system has been in this area for a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah. I went to elementary school a block away from this coffee shop. And I went to junior high 8 blocks away in the other direction, Hamilton, over on Hamilton,
Okay.
20th and Hikes. But for the most part, I have so my spiritual gift is hanging out. It really is.
It's a great gift to have. My spiritual gift is aggravation, but
John,
I think hanging out's better.
You know what? You're right, man. It is. You're right, man. But
I'm
anyway,
a pain in the ass. That's my spiritual gift.
but it's a
Anyway, hanging out is a
That
great
caught me off
spiritual gift. Well, it's kind of like the biblical gift of encouragement, hanging out,
It is.
encouraging people.
So yeah, but But it's been I love people. So ministry has always kind of intersected with business in and around that area, and the stuff that we've done downtown at St. John's over the last 30 years. Man, this is year 30.
Wow.
For us, has really just intersected around social justice from a sort of a community support standpoint, and so for instance, we're building housing downtown, and we have been for about 16 years now, getting ready to build our fourth and fifth project this coming year, and then our distribution stuff, the Bread of Life. We have a sort of a new partner since Hurricane Harvey, Procter & Gamble, and
Wow.
they give us between $3 and $4 million worth of product a year. But pretty much always, Matt, it connects in and around how we can be present to people. That's I think that's one thing. As an extrovert, I didn't know how ministry would work out. But when I ultimately came to this work, it dawned on me that okay, so this is basically a party with a definitive cause, and that's kind of how it's been.
And just to watch the folks that you affected, I mean, a lot of my friends who kind of came through St. John's really
Yeah.
consider you and your wife to be kind of their godparents,
Yeah.
spiritual godparents, and just the depth of those folks, the breadth of what they're doing in the world now, and a lot of that root system kind of comes back to the seeds that you and Juanita kind of both nurtured and cultivated and poured into them, and so you've got your fingers in everywhere, but those fingers and what you're cultivating has borne a lot of fruit.
Thank you, man. The work in and of itself has been a kind of a labor of love, but I've probably felt like quitting every year over the last 7, at least once lately.
I think John and
Lately.
Yeah, at least once, and I'm thinking, even now, I'm looking at most of it in the rearview mirror,
Yeah.
but even more so, thinking, what can what's on the road ahead in life. My wife often asks me a question, and the question is, what would you love? Not who, but what. And at the core, at the answer to that question is kind of where I'm going next. I try not to do anything that I don't want to do. That's in ministry, that's in life. If I feel obligated, it ain't gonna work out. Because I'm destructive in that term. But really just kind of thinking now, where can where will love take me? On this next part of my journey.
So your wife, Juanita, who's also co-pastor with you at St. John's, I read, she just wrote for the Houston Chronicle, wasn't there a series of little reflections, right?
Yeah.
And but one of them was a lady who said, I'm never going to wear a bra
again.
Remember that one?
Ditching the bra.
She has, I'm ditching the bra. She owns like a farm that makes a goat dairy farm or something. She goes, yes. She goes, so if you don't like it, with me walking around with no bra, that's your problem. But I'm not going to do anything ever again that I don't want to do. And I don't wear a bra. No, yeah, she's just she goes, just bras are painful and I'm not going to do it anymore because I don't have to.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, that's your fault. It made me think of that because not only that was not Juanita's article that she wrote, but it was someone
But they
that
used
wrote.
Juanita's picture
Her picture.
next to that I'm ditching the bra. I say, baby, what was the title?
You don't told me this.
It was because it was several different authors that wrote little
Six.
snippets. It was
Right.
6 of them, yeah.
I said, what was the total of your piece? She said it was. I said, well, beside your picture I'm ditching my bra.
That's so good.
You just frame that.
You framed that bad. But yeah, she wrote 2 books during the pandemic.
Yeah.
One entitled "Learning to Be," and the other is about being a 1 on the Enneagram scale. She's a 1, and 1s are intense rule followers, and people who like organize their lives around all of the rules. And then she marries me, who could give a shit.
Who's a big rule breaker?
And what's the free spirit one?
7. What are you on
I'm
the
an 8.
Enneagram? You're an 8?
Yeah,
I'm an 8.
you're an 8. I would figure you're an 8. It's a Martin Luther King was an 8.
I think I knew that.
and I think the challenging, the overarching challenge of being kind of an 8 on the scale is we challenge just for challenge's sake, not always, for the right reasons necessarily, but I'll challenge convention, which as a Methodist minister, my journey has been challenging for a lot of people.
Well, when you're in a system that tries to put you in a box, 8s don't like to be put in a box.
8s don't like to be put in a box.
They don't like to be controlled.
Right.
And
it makes it difficult from a very systemic standpoint as it relates to the church itself. Yeah.
Right. Well, and you've also been a prophetic voice out of your 8 into the system, as well. You've been something that has not gone away and it continued to raise the flag saying there's a different way that we can do this. And a counter narrative to, I just think about kind of the ways that you've held yourself within our own kind of conference, and the way that you've preached, you've led, the issues you brought up around both kind of whether that's race or poverty or even in during the AIDS kind of crisis, So
in the I think on the whole timeline, we started with homelessness, moved to added addiction, and HIV, mostly around the same time in the early 90s. And then our work around LGBTQ inclusion, I think, has probably cost us more than any of the issues that we've embraced along the way.
When you say cost more, what do you mean?
Financially and
the church,
and relationally. We've probably had 10,000 plus people leave the church because of my position on LGBTQ inclusion.
That would typically kill most churches.
Yeah, 30,000 have joined over the last 30 years, and at least 10,000 have left because of that, my position on that issue. I think the lightning rod, when Anise Parker was mayor, she attempted to enact the HERO Ordinance, the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance.
What was that around? What the HERO Ordinance was around?
Around inclusion, and the opposition of that ordinance basically focused on, there were 14 categories of people who were being represented in this ordinance. The opposition focused on exclusively the trans community from a marketing standpoint, and it was really unfortunate because the ordinance was defeated, which really meant a lot of people to this day can still be discriminated against in public spaces. But there were folks who came to me and said, I just can't, I don't agree with you, and I can't be part of that that experience, Yeah.
One of the things that's interesting to me is, of course, to tell people a little bit about when you went to St. John's and kind of how that got started. I know that I actually came to a thing here, and I don't remember what year it was. It was in the mid '90s. It was like a school of congregational development or something, and you and Juanita were speaking at a class or something. I can't remember. And I went to it. Only thing I ever remember about that was you talking about how you fired people.
Yeah.
You thanked them.
I thanked him. Right.
Remember that? I've used that.
Yeah.
I stole that straight from you. I'm like, I didn't even know who this guy was, but I went to this class. It's like, and he's like, yeah, well, just, I just bring him in and just thank him for being here. But anyway, yeah.
So if you ever do that, if you ever walk into my office and I just really
come on
want
on,
to thank you for
come on
being
in.
here.
I just want to thank
I'm
you.
like, darn it.
I just always loved the way you talked about it. Say, hey, it's nothing bad. I just want to thank you for what you've done, but thank you. We're done. But tell people a little bit about the story of St. John's, because you go in there and it growing, like you say, and being through all of this stuff, and then I'd like to hear a little bit, because I know you've been involved in conversation and written and reflected on this, of what it's like to be a black man in a predominantly white denomination.
Yeah.
And that might be where you just want to land instead of the St. John story. But I think the St. John story is fascinating.
Well, I've really never, Methodism is interesting. United Methodism, first of all, it's a unique community that, and I often say the tent was big enough for me. Unlike many expressions or denominations, so for instance, including me, in and of itself, meant that the tent was either had some extension poles, all right, or it was an expression that had enough wiggle room, to include the other. One with a different perspective. I think the challenge that the denomination is facing now is that it's attempting to create sort of a partition in a big open tent. Now, there have been challenging aspects about the entrance to the tent for years. And I think one of the things that's going to have to be undone is, how the openings, the doorways to the tent is managed, and they've got to begin with opening the doorway to everybody from an inclusive clergy position, and then from there, we can talk about including the rest of the world in this movement. But there's pushback, and that pushback, I think, is going to change the composition of the tent. It's going to change the way in which this denomination has historically made room for folk like me, and I don't think the end is going to be good. I really don't. What I do see, though, and I've been telling my congregation this for a long time. So the building that we occupy in downtown Houston was a Methodist Episcopal South congregation in its origin, and if we do any digging in the ME South, history archives, we're going to see a lot of racial division and delineation. But I remind my congregation all the time, the folk that built that building that opened it in 1917, started in 1895. All right, that's when the congregation became a suburban church plant from First United Methodist downtown. A suburban church plant from First, right? If we think about how that, and I tell my congregation all the time, I said 100 years ago, there's no indication that one day a black guy with a beard like mine would be standing in this spot as the pastor of this church. I said, in the same way, 100 years from now, there's a good possibility it's going to be a white guy that looks like Matt, right, standing in this place
pulpit, yeah.
the same way. With that being said, I think attempting to construct a path for history is always a mistake, and that's what the Methodist Church is doing right now, attempting to construct a path for its narrative, instead of just opening the damn door and letting people in. You know, I used to, for several years, I got with a group of the largest, the 100 largest churches.
Yeah.
And I remember once telling the convener of that group, I said, you know, I know we're getting ready to adjourn, but can I just say something? And I think we were in Georgia and Atlanta for that particular meeting. And I said, you know, unfortunately, the kind of experience this group is attempting to curate wouldn't have made room for me and my daddy, right? I said, and now I'm gonna tell you, if you can't make room for me and my daddy, then I think we're gonna have a problem. And in that moment, I saw that you know there was some movement towards at least admitting to the tension that exists. What we can't do though is ignore the realities that the world has changed, and that in less than 20 years, it will be a majority minority world. I mean, a country, and any attempts at this point to alter that, and that's what's happening is all of these attempts are to alter the inevitable course of this country becoming a place of diverse color, and I think the Methodist Church's attempt to legislate that is going to be a problem that it won't be able to sort out or navigate in the big picture. It just won't. I know that was a lot, but I think one of my regrets now is, you know, as I look back, we should have forced this particular question years ago, and you know, now's a good. Now there's no time like the present, but this quiet, subtle, sexist and racist determination has been on the books for quite a while, and it just needs to be changed.
The 2015, you know, having served in Georgia, and Texas, right, South Georgia,
South
no less.
Georgia. Mm-hmm.
You know, until 2015, it was easy to say, can't do that anyway. Can't do a wedding.
Right.
Even if you asked, couldn't do it. And so when that 2015 thing changed, that forced, that was a dividing, that was a, so what do you call that, inflection point, if you will,
Right.
that said, okay, now we have to deal with it. And then look at the way we've had to deal with it. We keep moving it.
Yeah.
And then
Kicking the ball down.
Fortunately, the pandemic came. And now, you know, they say to people, it's like, okay, well, we're going to meet in 20 and then 21 and 22. And now they're saying, oh, we probably won't even meet in 22 because who knows if delegates from around the world in Africa and Philippines can even come to the U.S. in 22. We don't know the answer to
Right.
that question. So it's like, might get moved again. And at some point, I think what needs to happen and what is happening is it's just like coming out of the pandemic. It's kind of self-policing.
Yeah.
Like we open up and say, okay, if you want a vaccine, you can get one. If you don't want one, and we have some people that don't want one, you know, but they know what the risk is. But
Right.
they can come and they can self-police their own life. Now it's like, if you don't want to be in the United Methodist Church, if you want to stay, you can stay. If you want to be in the United Methodist Church, you can go.
Right.
They're creating options for everybody. I don't think the United Methodist Church is a perfect church. I think we got a lot of work to do. I don't bureaucracy, but around just issues that we confront in front of us. We talk about race in our congregation this much, and some people's heads begin to explode. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously. I mean, I had
Yeah.
people mad at me last summer because we're just beginning to just have conversations, and we said we'll have a couple of studies around some books around white privilege or this, and man, you would have thought I freaking
Yeah.
opened the door to becoming a communist or whatever. I mean,
Right.
it was like alien talk for some people. We had people literally left the church.
Oh, wow.
I had a guy sent me an email, and he said, take me off the rolls. I'm done with Black Lives Matter Chapelwood.
Okay. Wow. You know, John, I would, I've thought about this often, but if I had experienced 400 years of unchecked privilege, I probably would be a little challenged by the thought of losing that that access to opportunity, to financial advancement. I think it's human nature to fight. I guess in many ways to fight being in authority. I mean, it's a privileged position. I think when it's acknowledged, it's a problem. As a problem, then it has to be addressed, and that's where we are today. So I grew up in Houston, grew up in the Heights, drank from a separate water fountain in Houston until I was 12. Used the colored-only restroom. Sat in the colored section in restaurants and on buses and in public spaces. Never understood it as a kid. Never understood it. But I knew that there was some unspoken, unwritten rule that relegated me to that place. The craziest thing, though, the Houston Public Zoo. I had my mom take me to the zoo often, and for one reason, because of the lion head fountain in the middle of the zoo when I was a kid. They tell me that the lion head fountain is still there. I haven't been to the zoo in many. It is. So watch this, Matt. When I was a kid, she would take me there. I would bypass all of the animal exhibits. I always made a direct path to the lion head fountain. For one reason, it was the only place there wasn't two fountains. There was only one lion head, and every kid of every hue lined up to drink from that fountain. And even as a 6-year-old, I was aware enough to realize that there's something right about this. There's something not right about that other. And I think where we are today is acknowledging those unspoken, the unspoken presence of that colored water fountain and that colored only section and that colored restroom, that colored only restroom. And I think the dismantling that is taking place is just time. I mean, it is time, man. You know, when I think about how over all of these years, even though it hadn't been a same section, I mean that thing has been going for a while, but there are still invisible lines and barriers that exist, and I think the church has to be the place that leads change in that area. This is my experience with church. So I came to church to the faith later, because I never saw the faith as powerful enough to make change in the world that existed in. Because here I am, I'm going to the zoo, and the folk at the zoo got it figured out. It's one lion head fountain. I go to the damn church, all right, and they are telling me, in essence, to be a good slave. To this is wrong, but it's the way it is. They got it figured out at the zoo, the church. So here we are, 2021. All right? It's still figured out at the zoo, but the church is still wrestling with certain sections for gay folk, and really certain sections for black folks, and certain sections for white folk, and they call that Sunday morning.
Yeah. The church is, I think, the church is a reflection of society, always has been culturally. But I think, again, this is just going to sound the way it sounds. I always say that before I say something. I'm just going to be honest. I have a tendency, and I get myself in trouble. But
That's okay.
From someone who has grown up in white church and now really trying to bridge gap, trying to be understanding, just trying to learn, right? Trying to be open and attuned.
Right.
And recognizing now the people who are mad at me, attacking me, even though I'm not anywhere near like, I mean, Matt's the real progressive liberal. I mean, right?
Lightning rod.
Matt's, that's why I brought him in, to be the lightning rod. It's when we brought him in, there were several people that were like, yeah, he brought Matt in to do the gay weddings.
That's right.
That was, I was like, so, but there's
gonna be
fear.
interesting.
When you talk about fear, I remember I've said this before. Richard Rohr talks about how everything is grief. Everybody's dealing with grief, and he says conservative type people tend to manifest their grief with fear or in fear, and more liberal or progressive people manifest their grief in anger, like angry fight, but the fear. And I see a society that things are changing, and you live kind of in a bubble your whole life, and you don't realize. A guy came in my office, he was so mad at me, and he's like, you're buying into all this liberal brainwashing. I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, he says, you don't believe in white privilege, do you? I was like, yeah, I think I do. And he's like, well, what does that mean? I said, well, my dad left when I was 14.
Yeah.
I don't have a safety net. I didn't inherit any money. I've worked my whole life. I've made my own way. He said, see, that's what I'm talking about. You pulled yours. I said, you know what, though? I've never had any obstacle in my life or barrier that I've had to deal with that had to do with the color of my skin. As a matter of fact, I think the color of my skin opened doors, and I didn't learn this until I was an associate at St. Luke's, and I got appointed to St. Andrew in Columbus, Georgia. And I remember a friend of mine who had been a black pastor in South Georgia his whole career, 40 years. And here I am in my first full-time senior pastor appointment at 27 years old, right? And I'm making like $15,000 more than he is at his church, and he's been serving 40 years.
Right.
And we were in a meeting, and he just looked and he just shared this information. And in my time, I'm thinking we were just jealous, or whatever. And it took, because I was young and stupid, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know any better. And then through the years, I realized, well, when you're in the United Methodist Church, especially if you're in South Georgia, if you're like James Swanson or Greg Blue or somebody, there's two churches, or Joe Robertson. There's South Columbus, there's St. Mary's, and there's M.O. Harris. And that's the three churches. And all of them pay significantly less than churches that are way smaller than those churches.
Right.
So you're limited. If you're a black pastor, a black ordained Methodist preacher or licensed, that's it. There's no upward mobility.
Right.
There's nowhere for you to go. There's nothing for you to do. Whereas for me, there was 600 options.
Exactly.
And every time I moved, I got an increase in my salary.
Right.
And so it was not something it's something I'm still learning. I think right now the thing that I find is people are afraid. There's fear, and it has to do with all this manufacturing, this outrage and manufacturing threats that are not really threats.
Right.
And they think, I'm going to lose my house, I'm going to lose my livelihood, I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to lose whatever. It's made up stuff.
Right.
And it's just, I think in these days we need to get more into the gospel, more into the life of Jesus, because if we are more faithful to that, you find a wrestling with all of this stuff that I think we need to wrestle with. Jesus was pretty revolutionary And we have sugar-coated it so much,
Yeah.
and I'm guilty of that. I find the easiest. And so when you start to test some of these things, you realize when you push a little in your church,
Right.
it bubbles up, and you find out where the outrage comes from, and you find out that there's racism in your congregation,
Well,
and that there's even racism
Right.
in myself
Right.
of ways that I'm not even aware of, and I'm discovering in real time,
Exactly.
being confronted with this. I mean, I think that's kind of what, when I say racial recalibration or reset or whatever's going on, there's an awareness, and it makes some people are embracing it and willing to learn and grow, and other people, man, it's that fight or flight kind of mentality.
Right. I think the pandemic has the pandemic is gonna shape a future for the church that the church isn't quite ready for. But people, after the last, I guess, year and a half, 18 months or so, of not having a building to go to, or having to define what faith is, external of physical structures, and external of existing societal structures that are reinforced by those physical structures. So what we're going to really find as we begin to reconvene, that that more people than we imagined were already tired of a lot of the things we had taken for granted, and there's going to be a shift in how convening takes place on the road ahead that will ultimately speak to how privilege really does manifest. I think the one thing I've noticed from my global travels that we're just starting to experience in the U.S. is that that class is in many ways the next frontier of exclusion, and the more we see the world evolve, we're going to see the haves begin to draw distinctive lines. We've already seen it, actually, and it's going to be an interesting world. I think the church has a place in this new world, but in order for the church to take its place in this new world, it's going to have to be a bolder expression than it is right now.
I think the church has involved itself in this kind of, like, the psychology of the church is almost like, at least within kind of spheres that I've operated in, has helped people to feel good, and because of that, it's really its dominant narrative is about how do you get out of the world, right? But when you, as John was saying, as you read the Gospels and you see this radical orientation of Jesus to the world that he's in, and the transformation of that world that really is based on the breaking down of all of the barriers and the categories within that culture, right?
Yeah.
And so when he says you're going to have to hate your mother, father, sister, it really is a betrayal of the values that you grew up with, saying this is how the world operates.
Exactly.
Right? And so when you begin to follow Jesus, it's as if you're betraying all the other things, even mother, father, sister, brother, right?
Exactly.
And that's the price.
That's the price.
And so that's a gospel I was never encountered with.
Yeah.
Kind of growing up, it was really about how do I feel good, and then how do I get out of this world, knowing that I'm going to a better place, which is not the gospel. It seems like it's an anti-gospel.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes. But
we move. There's this growing up, it's religion or faith was always this personal, devotional, hyper individualistic. So you go to these Bible studies, you participate. How does it make you feel? And for Methodists, we always had this social component, which is like Habitat for Humanity. We'll go build a house, or we'll go serve in the soup kitchen, or whatever else. But I don't know that we tied together the social, the way that faith moves out and socially intersects. What I sense is happening is there's a lack of everybody says I'm spiritual but not religious. I mean, man, if I had a dime for every time I heard that, I wouldn't know more what it means, but I would be rich.
Yeah.
But there's a sense where spirituality needs to be addressed in a more deeply authentic ways. Like we talk about these spiritual practices, but to help people tie that into like the real world you live in every day.
Right.
Right? Instead of it being this separated thing. I don't know that we've done a good job with that in the white church particularly, because it's been all like you come, you sit, you feel good, you soothe. It's like Jesus loves you, you go back home. And then when you're at work or when you're in your politics or whatever else, you know, it doesn't impact that.
Yeah.
And that's been the biggest disappointment for me this past year, is how the political, this Christian nationalism, secularism, where Christianity gets tied into politics and partisan political figures and all of that, that's really been disappointing for me, because that is not at all. Can you imagine Jesus going around, you know, wearing a T-shirt that said "God loves Rome," you know?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
Rome, make Rome great again, or what?
great again.
No, I mean Rome. I mean,
Right.
it was like, and I just, the fact that we put so much faith in politicians and courts and institutions. Now, from your experience, I mean, I have the same level of trust in maybe in those things
No.
that I have, or people that I know have. I mean, they're looking like, oh, the president's going to save the country, you know, or whatever. Wow. Not to 50%, they don't think so.
Right. Well,
It's been really scary this past year.
if you as you drill through the current status and challenge, I think Ibram Kendi's book, Stamped from the Beginning, really sort of kind of tracks the sojourn of, you know, to where we are right now. And he tells a story that he thought ignorance and hatred were sort of the byproducts of racism, you know, for a large part of his life, only to find out that that racist thought was really a byproduct of policy, and policies are at the core of institutional life in every regard. Matter of fact, what we're talking about right now is a policy in the United Methodist Church that delineates an entire people group because of their sexual orientation, sexual identity. Without that policy, it's a different world. You know, when we start drilling down in the fact that, you know, that those courts do matter at every level of society, including the church court, when we begin to really see that these policies are, you know, have been a tool for at least the 400-year sojourn of black folk in America, and even before, we begin to see that, you know, there's a whole nother picture being painted that you know, that can be solved by something that's being combated right now, and that's you know, equity on the vote. You know, if voting suppression is voting suppression wouldn't be important if the vote didn't really matter in shaping how America runs. And the same applies for the church. You know, we've got to begin to think about how this book of policies we call the discipline impacts, delineates, and even discriminates against people because of their birthright. You know, it's so as we look to the future, I think conversations like this will make a difference. I don't think these conversations happen often enough. I don't think there are enough people with privilege willing to risk that privilege for the sake of a conversation like this. But if it happens more, we have an opportunity to encourage more to have the conversation, I believe, and hopefully that's what the future holds for all of us.
I think it's one of the biggest problems is you only talk to or at people that already agree with you.
Well, yeah.
The echo chamber. I mean, the fact that, I don't have a problem with someone who only watches CNN or only watches Fox or only watches MSNBC. But what I tell people is if you do, you're getting one thing, and you're going to choose which one you want, and it's going to reinforce like your worldview that you already believe in. So
it's a relationship algorithm.
Cross dialogue of, I realized when I was a part of a group on the early stages of in Indianapolis talking about what does it look like if the denomination separates, right? And you've got this group from, this WCA side, Good News side, and then you have like the centrists, which I was one of those. I don't even know what that means. And then you had like the progressives, and you realized real quick the language you use is different. The groups want to take and redefine terms. So all of a sudden you've got the group on the right that's now co-opted orthodoxy.
Right.
We're Orthodox and you're not.
Right.
I'm like, last I checked, I think I'm still Orthodox. I
Right.
mean, based on what 2,000 years of that word means.
Right.
But it's still like traditionalist or Orthodox or evangelical or all these kind of like, we're going to take the words, we're going to define them the way we want them, and they don't fit you, they fit us.
Yeah.
And I just think, the language, I wonder if you're moving in this direction, like United Methodist Church ain't perfect at all.
Right.
But if you move in any of these directions, right, whether it's hard right, hard left, and you become more exclusive, how does it impact things like, they say, it's not going to be impactful, but how does it impact things like women in ministry?
Right.
How does it impact racial issues and
Right.
demographics? How does it impact? Because I can tell you a lot of the people that I know that are really like itching and ready to go tomorrow to some new conservative Methodist church, I don't know. I don't see a lot of diversity in that.
Right.
Personally, politically, racially, and they'll say, well, of course there is, and look at this, and I'm like, man, when United Methodist Church is already 98% white, isn't it?
Exactly.
So I mean, like, if you're going to split and take a right turn, you're going to be 99.9%. I mean, I don't understand, but I don't know. It's
When you started by saying, like, you grew up in a big tent,
Yeah.
and that tent included you,
Right.
and not only and you as a prophetic voice. And I think the more we partition the tent, the more voices of prophecy that we lose, and the less we become the body of Christ effective in the world that God loved and gave
Right.
Himself to.
Here's what I want to hear from you.
Yeah.
If someone's listening, white pastor in United Methodist Church, what can we do personally, but in our congregations, that help progress a better relationship and understanding to make progress in kind of where we need to go, especially around issues of race? We've been talking a lot about that and other things as well, but around inclusion in race, what I think a lot of people have asked me, it's like, well, what do I do? What do I do? And it's not, I'm not putting this on you to say it's your responsibility to tell white folks how to figure this out.
Yeah.
But I do think that if you're going to be open and listen, you need to listen to voices that are not your own, that can either challenge or say, open up this, or just listen, whatever. I mean,
Here's an idea. So my last book was entitled "I'm Black, I'm Christian, I'm Methodist." I wrote it with 9 other writers who are all Methodist clergy, all ages, all gender, and all orientation. It was just a very, very diverse group of writers. And even some were more conservative and progressive, but they were all the writers were black. I think a good starting point from a Methodist standpoint, a Methodist conversation, would be for non-black congregations to read that book, and then I think another step could be creating conversation with those authors. The authors are all over the country and are very versed in their specific position and interest in the church, but to create some open dialogue around that. We've done it so far in maybe 5 annual conferences, and And from that, I think some good occurred in terms of opening the conversation to some new thoughts and ideas and to some new possibilities. But I think that's a starting spot. And then I think there are other steps that could be taken, and I think Chapelwood has taken those steps through the work with Project Curate, but to really create honest dialogue amongst people of different races, and to honor and even respect the positions of each other. Not a lot of churches have taken that on, and I think even I'll say this. I think the black church needs some introspection as it relates to this issue as well. I think so. I'll. This is the lightning rod. I think in many cases, the black church stopped reading the scripture through the lens of the oppressed a while back, and started looking for ways out and paths to prosperity out of Scripture. I think to begin to look at from a black perspective how Scripture diagrams and even provides paths out of oppression, or some of the things that the predominantly black church can do. I think the predominantly white church can begin to understand that this has been that religion has created an oppressive regime that ultimately needs to be overthrown, and subsequently we won't have if we don't get to the point where we begin to see Scripture in a lens outside of what it can do for me personally, then religion will no longer have a value, and we'll be pretty much on our own.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of people check out from faith. You talk about the fastest growing demographic is non-affiliated, non-religious, and people look at the church, especially young people, and they're like, I don't really want to be a part of that if that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And so I think churches that intersect in real life and start speaking the faith and the gospel in some difficult things. I've always just said too, I've always thought it's about empathy. It's about love. Ultimately, it's about love. And all I tell people is can you have some empathy for someone who's not like you, who's walked in different shoes and had different experiences, and can you just listen and put yourself, if you're going to have what do they call that in meaningful conversations or meaningful relationship, at some point you have to get out of your shoes and put yourself in someone else's shoes best you can. You never can walk in their shoes perfectly. Exactly. But to listen and hear the pain or the struggle or whatever it is. And I just don't know that people want to do it. We just have a narcissistic generation, and the symptom of narcissism is a lack of empathy for other people. My definition of love is allowing a person to be who or what they choose for themselves without any insistence that they meet my expectations. And I think not until we get to the place where we are willing to accept the person in front of us for who they are, and who they expressed themselves to be, without really waiting on them to check a box for us, we've got some more work to do, and that's where we are. The institutional church. I think today I'm more spiritual than I am religious. Yeah. And becoming more spiritual and less religious every day.
And I think defining those terms, right? So it's like people ask me all the time, used to ask me, are you a Christian? And I now say, tell me what you think a Christian is, and I'll tell you if I'm that, right? Because those words are all contested, right?
They're all contested.
They're all contested, and so to have a space, and those have to be done in relationships that are deeply diverse and are given to each other at a different field and a different plane than what we've got right now. We've imagined this world that we live in. We can reimagine something different based on the gospel. We just can't.
Yeah, those terms are loaded concepts for sure.
Well, thanks.
It's good being with y'all.
Man, it's good being with you. We'll continue conversations on. I mean, I think having more conversations like this, and I think, one of the things I like the idea of, I talk about a bridge where there's two lanes, one's going out, one's coming in. And I think too often we talk about, at Chapelwood is a lot of our lanes go out, but we're really talking a lot about what are the lanes coming in that bring voices, that bring experiences into our life together. And I think partnering with churches like St. John's, building relationships where we can have broader conversations to learn, to listen to each other and be there for each other. There's one thing I always thought about Methodist Church. We're supposed to be connectional, and we're so deeply isolated from one another,
And we are. Now, I'll tell you, John, in all sincerity, if you look at the way the sort of the world is run, the fact is, a lot of tall white guys run the world. As a tall white guy yourself, you're challenging convention. Okay. I think you asked what could be done from your position of influence. I think you're taking a step to help some other people who actually run this thing potentially see a new opportunity. And I think what we have to do as humans is help other humans see the benefit of inclusion and diversity in the world. Otherwise, it's going to be us and them. And so I commend you. You're taking a step because you don't have to do this. You don't have to be a part of a conversation that literally challenges the convention in your own congregation. But in doing so, there's an opportunity that exists on the other side of it that even your congregation can benefit from in ways that right now are completely unrealized. And so keep up the work and keep talking.
Thanks for your wisdom, and thanks for hosting us at
man.
Through good.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Coffee. Yeah, we appreciate you.
Bless you.
Well, I'm John Stevens.
I'm Matt Russell.
Rudy Rasmus.
And this is Pod Have Mercy.
Yeah.